It's good to be with all of you. I know this gives a very good signal of end of the session with a lot of chairs, very less people. But I'll try to kind of keep it pretty simple. I think half of you on this chairs are people I know, so I'll kind of keep it super light. About me, I'm with the consulting firm EY. I work at a cyber defense center, and some of you are with EY, so good. And I've been participating in c0c0n for several years, and it's sort of coming back home. The topic which we are discussing today is about cyber threat to global financial systems. Now, I'm glad that we are only very limited people here, and those who spoke about the CISO's role are perhaps kind of slowly walking in, as they come in. Some of those conversations would have a slightly different connotation in the way we kind of look at global threats. Now, before getting in there, a quick disclaimer. All of what I'm going to say today is purely my opinions. It does not represent my firm or anything associated to what my firm expects me to do. Now, so this is purely looking at how the trends which the IMF have put up across about what is that we should do to keep the financial service sector active and alive in the years to come. Now, one thing we've all seen is security is an isolated part of infrastructure, and it is more a holistic function. And I know we kind of spoke about training a while back, and the gentleman there who mentioned about children doing tests for parents, right? So security has kind of taken a seat which is sort of comfortable, and there are a number of reasons why it has kind of evolved and got into that place. Now, if you look at what IMF has seen, especially about, they analyzed about 60 firms globally from all across the spectrums of emerging, developed and developing markets. And it's quite interesting if you really look at maturity of strategy is very good only in 22%. And if you look at supervision, it's again another 25%. If you look at monitoring, it's hardly 5%. And then reporting is way below the threshold of 10%. Now I'll try to build on it. What does it really mean? When you look at banks or the investment segment as a whole, we're all kind of very comfortably placed in a place where we're developing infrastructure, we're developing applications, we're talking about shifting left, we're talking about kind of modernized architecture, we're talking about digital. For all of what we're speaking, we're missing out on a great point where how much kind of engraved as a strategy to the broader ecosystem? Is the CIO subscribed to the idea of security as much as we want? Now, if he or she is subscribed, do we have sufficient level of supervision? So supervision is not just about external supervision, it's about the supervision systems inside the organization. I would, in a minute, talk about the competency or the competence of a cyber leader, the competence of a CISO has been negotiated and it's kind of gone way below the expectation. It's sort of a role which is very easy to navigate, even if you're a data protection officer, you navigate as a legal person, you get a role. If you have kind of, seen the history of ISO 27001 implemented it once or twice, you become a CISO. That's actually a burden to our market. And I'm saying this with pain. I've been there, I've done that. But if you really look at the reason why we are heading into a space where cybersecurity has kind of turned out to be a space of incompetence when you really look at the first areas, strategy and supervision. Because we don't have a clue of what's happening. And now, when you get into the next levels of monitoring and reporting, and that's where the security operations, security control, security defense will come in. You look at the real data, telemetry come up on your screen, and you're kind of trying to implement the things which are relevant for the systems, correlated with what's happening, which includes like, your IT infrastructure, your application environment, the telemetry associated to what is needed and what is not needed, the attacks, the compromises, and so on and so forth. And the last one, how much are we reporting with relevance as disclosures? So if you look at disclosures today, disclosures is for convenience. Disclosures is not incomplete. It's absolutely a choice. Because there is ignorance, it's easy for you to kind of just skip it and you move forward. Okay? So that's purely the reason. If you read this report, it's available in public. There's a blog post and a report. If you really go through it, you would see that the biggest challenge which is encountering the cyberspace for the non-tech and the GRC space is ignorance of the broader system. So as emerging engineers who probably would land into a role like a CISO in near future or a DPO in near future, you have a role to kind of really get a little elevated on your knowledge of what is the right level to be at. So which means there's a future role for a CISO who is electrifyingly competent to transform the way we kind of operate. Quickly, to touch on a few things which I wouldn't want to talk about all of these. This is the very general table stake: actors, motivators, and threats. I'm probably going to talk about only 4 things. Supply chain, vulnerabilities, and I've added this footnote because it's not usually seen: technical debt and incompetent stakeholders. Those are 2 very critical things which I want to re-emphasize several times as much as I could, as loud as I could, because this needs to be heard and it's needs to be implemented. If you really want to survive, if you want to see the banks go down, you can do whatever you want. If you want to see the banks stay there, you need to change. We need to have competent people in security. Now, talking about supply chain, today what do we do with the supply chain? We implement the third-party risk assessment. Very happy, a big tick in the box, and that's the end of it. So we just do a third-party risk assessment. What is third-party risk assessment? It's really slicing down your supply chain and you're giving it away to 15 different people. And you're asking them to fulfill a simple 200 questionnaire response to make them suitable for the service. And then you forget them completely. And when you have a breach, you'll go back, you'll look at the survey, and then you will distribute the fines which you received back to those vendors. And that's the biggest pearl we are landing up into. And many of those companies, by the time you go after them, have filed for insolvency. They don't have the money, right? Very happily, if you really look at many of the contracts, I have the privilege to look at several contracts for small organizations. They sign up for indemnity clauses like 10 times more than their revenue. Where do they pay this from? Okay, we say cyber insurance, no, it's not covered. Like, it's not covered nowhere. Right? So we'll have to look at our supply chain a little more in detail when we really kind of delegate. Currently, it's not the role of a CISO. It's not the role of an information security organization. It is assumed to be a vendor management role. It's a big peril which is landing out. Now, we spoke about in the previous panel, we were discussing about the privacy law in the country. We're talking about destruction of documentation, ceasing to kind of retaining the personal information. Again, we are entrusting it to another vendor to get it done. Okay? And we are forgetting that our technology have kind of, just having a side chat, that we have kind of, we have seen a lot of technology improvement like tokenization. The minute a person walks into a bank and opens up an application, his critical information can be tokenized. And it's as simple as pull and plug off. You don't need to chase around. It will become futile and it will become invalid. So we have mechanisms which are mature in the industry, which we don't even kind of apply. It is available, not every entities will look at it, but it's available, it needs to be considered. The second thing is about unpatched vulnerabilities. Now, when we look at at vulnerability management, I know most of you would probably sense that topic is relevant. When you bring up a vulnerability management program, it is again like a part of your information security organization, slightly interchangeable with the CIO's organization. You look at the report, very nice looking vulnerability dashboards, and you instruct the IT department to go fix it, and the conversation ecosystem or the conversation scope is only 40% or 60% or 80%. You do not bring your entire assets into your scope predominantly because those are technical debts, which at some historic state you would have already given into risk prioritization score, got an acceptance in the back of an envelope, and then slide in some files, and they don't have a clue of that. And if you really know, long ago, maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, all our ATMs used to be technical debts with traditional Windows up on it, and anybody, even a kid, could go and compromise that. So I'm talking about one slice of an example which we all see, but if you look at all global financial institutions, they still sit on parts of mainframe, they still sit on parts of AS400, they sit on traditional infrastructure, which stays as technical debt, way right under the risk acceptance, it's already signed off that it's accepted. But if you really look at the ecosystem of how the exposures are going to happen, these technical debts, if not rightly measured and correlated, are the ones which really going to bring your organizations down. So vulnerability management should become a holistic solution where the CISO should have 100% inclusion of vulnerability management as a mandate, as opposed to seeing a green dashboard, which we all love to see. So we don't really care if it's not included, but you want to see a green dashboard. So that is another big shift about where are the non-inclusions sitting. But going back on, just one more topic I want to again talk about is the heavy cloud consumption, which we all kind of applaud. We spoke about supply chain. And way back in 2019, just wanted to pick up one of those examples of a massive cloud outage, which Google publicly acknowledged. It was about 5 hours and 15 minutes for pretty much 80% of their consumers went down. And at that point in time, the cloud consumption of the banking sector was barely 3%. Today, including max computations, Google Cloud itself accounts for about 25% when it comes to critical applications and critical compute being performed by clouds as such of Google, Azure, and AWS. So it's just that it didn't happen now, but it didn't happen in the past. What if a similar outage happens today, where very critical compute, including for example, if you're an insurance company, your backbone compute on capital adequacy happens on cloud. What if the engine is in building up quickly and the numbers and validations are skipping? So all of those are areas we will have to think about how we're looking at a possible digital lockdown in future, and how is that encounter going to happen. I don't know how many of you are part of Fed examinations in the US. One of the questions Fed asks when you present your banking solution or your insurance solution out for any certification, any new solutions, they would ask how much time will you take to manually perform this task, and of your fleet of people, how many of them can perform this at that specified time. If it is less than 5% of your group, your solution will not get approved. And this is again for core investment banks and core investment platforms. Now, countries like India, I don't know how much we are into that, how much we are scrutinizing that, we don't even know about it. We have no documentations associated with that fact as such. So just a polite mention, because you're all young people, you will all emerge into those seats of a CISO or an information security chief. Be respectful of your own seat and your role, and that makes a big difference. I'll conclude with a couple of thoughts, and where we are headed is sort of the bottom line, right? Now, if you look at breach and the fines associated with that, by VMware some time back is roughly about 6 million per mega breach. Fines associated, a mega breach is about 6 million. Now, what does these banks and institutions do? They provision some money for such breaches, but they don't provision that money to secure. Okay? Now we're seeing the mega meltdown, we're seeing how the responses of the global banks. It is not just because of capital adequacy problem, it's not because of poor debt, it's because of core technical gap in terms of not understanding their whole ecosystem. And we are eventually getting into a massive big bang solvency crisis in the future. Because today, every individual retail banking user are indemnified. Your money is secure. You're taken care of. Somebody is pledging for the problem, but are they putting the right solutions to solve it? Perhaps not. I know there's kind of an electrifying performance just waiting as seats have started turning towards that side. I'm looking forward to it. The man who sent our satellite up there, and then perhaps the moonwalking and so on. Really curious to kind of get into that conversation, so I will wrap up quickly. So I would urge you all to keep this very gentle thought in mind, crisp and succinct. We need to have our banking systems alive. We need to have our investment strategy alive. But there's a huge responsibility in you and I. I look forward to seeing some of you take that up and wish you all the very best. Thank you.